Okay, so I chose Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe for my book club presentation, um, as will be analyzed mostly through Tatum. When we first meet Ari, he is a 15-year-old second generation Hispanic Mexican American. He is in a lower class or lower middle class living situation socioeconomically. And as far as his sexual identity, when we first meet him, he is confused. So perfect little mix of coming of age ingredients there. For his community, we've got family, his mom and dad, and a brother in prison. So brother is not in his picture. That is a source of frustration for Ari. His home is in El Paso, Texas, historically about two-thirds Hispanic population, and he goes to school at Austin High School, historically about one-third. So a little difference there between the neighborhood and the school. Some important life events before we get into the theory is first Ari meets Dante. Dante sees him at the local swimming pool, offers to teach him how to swim. Because of that, then Ari goes and meets Dante's family, particularly his father. And Dante is immediately impressed with how warm and communicative and expressive his father is, and is a little taken aback by how intimate the relationship between Dante and his father are. After some time and some narrative, obviously, Dante winds up getting beaten pretty severely, winds up in casts, and Ari goes to visit him in the hospital. Kind of a catalyzing point, obviously, for himself internally realizing what is important. Then finally, Ari winds up confronting reality and admitting that he is in love with Dante and that it is the romantic kind and that he should probably listen. So, getting into kind of the theory pieces for ethnic identity, I chose the following scene. Ari and Dante are having a conversation, and I'll just read it, where they say, but we're not Japanese, we're Mexican. We're not really Mexicans. Do we live in Mexico? But that's where our grandparents came from. Okay, okay. But do we actually know anything about Mexico? So in this conversation, why I chose it is that Ari and Dante are clearly kind of exploring with each other, using each other as sounding boards to see what do we think of ethnic identity, and can we reach sort of a mutual conclusion or something that's satisfying. Obviously, in this conversation, they don't get there. And despite being raised second generation American, Ari and Dante feel culturally connected to Mexico only through their parents and grandparents, which is pretty key here too. So Tatum on Rec identity. Culture is also an important part of one's sense of group membership, suggesting that what is referred to as racial identity is really more fully described as racial, ethnic, cultural identity. Whether speaking of racial or ethnic identity specifically, these identities remain most salient to individuals of racial or ethnic groups that have been historically disadvantaged or marginalized. That's from Tatum 118. This will tie very nicely into the next couple of slides where we have a scene. Ari is joking with his mother that he wants to get a job mowing lawns. Ari's mom's response to that is, that's too stereotypically Mexican. Likewise, Dante does not like to wear shoes around his house or really in general, be it in the neighborhood, tries to go out without them on. This obviously makes his mother nervous. And she tells him, you can afford shoes. Being Mexican doesn't have to mean you're poor. So clearly we have two examples here where the boys are actually being fed a negative stereotype from their parents almost for no good reason, just a little bit of hand-me-down self-stereotyping there. So on socioeconomic status, Tatum says there's still a great deal of social segregation in our communities. Consequently, most of the early information we receive about others, people racially, religiously, or socioeconomically different from ourselves, does not come as a result of firsthand experience. The secondhand information we do receive has often been distorted, shaped by cultural stereotypes, and left incomplete. A little bit further, it's about the impact of the parents actually passing that idea down to them. And then we're going to get more into some intersectionality because that really is kind of the core of what Ari is going through. It's not just a cultural thing for him. We see through the book that Ari rejects his initial attraction to Dante. He learns his aunt was gay and that nobody wanted to talk about it. It was an uncomfortable thing for the family. Learns his brother killed someone in a transphobic rage. And I've got in parenthetical there, ties to machismo. I think that we can say pretty comfortably that there is a little bit of probably just extenuating cultural like machismo coming from either hand-me-down kind of ideas, even if it's not present in the family environment, that those attitudes and ideas are still kind of present in life for both Ari and Dante. So he develops a crush on a girl that is dating a member of a Mexican street gang, a little bit more full circle there for the narrative, feels pressure to be normal and have children to make his parents happy, and he knows that his Mexican heritage is important to his parents. He doesn't feel he doesn't feel connected to it personally. Um, so Tatum on intersectionality, she identifies that really sort of confronting racism head on and not being afraid of that conversation can move over and bring us into the realm where we're dealing with other isms. Really simple point that she's making. I just brought up these two quotes because they flesh that out very well. As for marginalization, here's a quote from Ari that I thought was really key to help explain what's going on inside of him. He says, "Storms always made me feel so small, even though summers were mostly made of sun and heat. Summers for me were more about the storms that came and went and left me feeling alone. Did all boys feel alone? The summer sun was not meant for boys like me. Boys like me belonged in the rain." So even though Ari feels that rec marginalization that Tatum is talking about, his ultimate marginalization is both internal and total. It's felt inside and from all around him by his dysfunctional family, the isolation from his brother and father, denial of his natural desires, all of those things kind of culminating into this full and total kind of marginalization for himself. However, for Dante, we'll see that actually his what he's dealing with really is more about the cultural identity, the ethnic identity or rec identity in terms of his marginalization. You'll see in this scene, he's talking about his cousins. He says, "I don't think they don't like me. They think they think I'm a little different. They're really Mexican, you know, and I'm sort of, well, what did you call me?" Or he says, "A pocho." That's exactly what I am. My Spanish isn't great. Or he says, "You can learn it." Learning it in school is different than learning it at home or on the street. Dante's home life has always been more open and supportive. And when we first met his father, we saw that very communicative, very warm family. So his own internal identity, he's not experiencing any fracturing really around the sexual side of it as Ari is. And so I've kind of come to look at it as he had the freedom to explore his cultural marginalization, since the bigger things personally weren't happening there. And so Tatum says, drawing on the work of social identity theorist Toffel and others, Fidi describes 4 possible outcomes for coping with this cultural conflict: assimilation, withdrawal, biculturalism, and marginalization. The bicultural strategy can be a very positive one, but is not easily achieved. For some, the attempt to bridge 2 worlds may result in alienation from both. Having rejected the old country ways of the family, yet unable to find full acceptance in the dominant culture, these adolescents often experience marginalization. And that is the end.